Okay.
From the maelstrom of a sundered world, the 8 realms were born. The formless and the divine exploded into life. Strange new worlds appeared in the firmament, each one gilded with spirits, gods, and men. Noblest of the gods was Sigmar. For years beyond reckoning, he illuminated the realms, wreathed in light and majesty as he carved out his reign. His strength was the power of thunder. His wisdom was infinite. Mortal and immortal alike kneeled before his lofty throne. Great empires rose, and for a while treachery was banished. Sigmar claimed the land and sky as his own and ruled over a glorious age of myth. But cruelty is tenacious. As had been foreseen, the great alliance of gods and men tore itself apart. Myth and legend crumbled into chaos. Darkness flooded the realms. Torture, slavery, and fear replaced the glory that came before. Sigmar turned his back on the mortal kingdoms, disgusted by their fate. He fixed his gaze instead on the remains of the world he had lost long ago, brooding over its charred core, searching endlessly for a sign of hope. And then, in the dark heat of his rage, he caught a glimpse of something magnificent. He pictured a weapon born of the heavens, a beacon powerful enough to pierce the endless night, an army hewn from everything he had lost. Sigmar set his artisans to work, and for long ages they toiled, striving to harness the power of the stars. As Sigmar's great work neared completion, he turned back to the realms and saw the dominion of chaos was almost complete. The hour for vengeance had come. Finally, with lightning blazing across his brow, he stepped forth to unleash his creation. The Age of Sigmar had begun.
Thank you for joining me on another lore review of Age of Sigmar. Today we're going to be exploring the mortal realms themselves to try and give us a little bit of background as we go forward and explore individual topics in more detail. I want to go ahead and break this kind of explanation up because it's a very large topic into a few bullet points here. So the first, we're going to talk about what the realms are like themselves. Now, as described in the main book, there's 8 realms, or 8 mortal realms as they're called. Each one represents a different, what used to be Wind of Magic in Warhammer 8th edition. So there's the realm of metal, realm of fire, heavens, light, death, shadows, and so forth. And each one of these, if you can imagine a entire universe, okay, it's just a whole universe infused with that particular brand of magic. So the realm of fire, everything has a fire theme. Everything has a shadow theme, the realm of shadows, and so forth. They all have vastly different environments. Like there's parts that are tundra, parts that are desert, mountain, swamp, but all of them have the theme that they are infused with that particular realm's magic. So you can have a lot of variety even within each realm. This is certainly the hardest topic for new players to understand, the idea of an entire realm, universe, plane of existence, however you want to word it, being infused with magic, and that they're all linked together by what are called realm gates. These realm gates, they provide near instant travel across the same realm to other realms. It's kind of hard to discern. It seems as though some of them can be pointed in different directions, almost like the Stargate, if you will, if you're familiar with that franchise. Some seem to be fixed in one location, so point A to point B, nothing else. And so as we follow the Age of Sigmar and the conquest of the Stormcast Eternals, we're getting a better and better sense of what the realms are like and how they're connected as our heroes go through the gates and try to reestablish connections and boundaries throughout the realms. Now, as we're also talking about the realms, it's really important to talk about the kind of fantasy that Age of Sigmar represents. By this I mean Warhammer 8th edition used to be very what's called Tolkien-esque. By this I mean J.R.R. Tolkien wrote a series of books called Lord of the Rings that heavily influenced some of the early authors of the Black Library who wrote Warhammer 8th edition and so forth. Now, if you take just a moment and think about Lord of the Rings, you'll realize that it actually has very similar physics to the real world, right? Arrows work the same way, weapons do. Really, there's just a bunch of races, a different technology advancement line, and there's some magic. It's not uber prevalent, but it's there. And those aspects go into a very classic fantasy trope, right? There's goblins and orcs and bad guys, and there's heroes that are all trying to fight them. But realistically, if you take a step back and really look at it, the world is really not vastly different from the world we know it. Well, if you know anything about Age of Sigmar, you know that it is not like that at all. In fact, some of the things that you're going to be reading throughout these books are quite mind-bending. Let me give you a few examples here. So, there are creatures that are big beyond imagination, things that, because the way gravity works in our world, would never be possible. Beasts that, there's a dragon that coils up, and so it looks like a sun, like a snake. If you look at a cobra from above, like the way it coils over, that's a sun. Essentially, it's just a dragon made of pure heat and energy that powers and melts metal around it, so it makes a river of silver and cool things like that. So, but the scale and magnitude and grandiose vision of this fantasy is very, very different from what we've known before. Another example from the book God Beasts is awesome, where there's a portion of this realm that is essentially a ring world. It's not the entire realm, but there's a portion of it that kind of hovers there, where it's a ring with just a small piece missing, like a chip out of it, so it's like a large semicircle. And so you can actually fall off of into like oblivion space, this realm, which is pretty interesting. Now, if you're on the ring, it looks like kind of like the ring world from Halo or the book Ring World, where you're on the surface and it's like a full environment, but if you step off, it's the nothingness of space. So you have things like that, but then you also have, in the first few books that were released, things that are very easy to imagine. Realm of Fire just being ashen wasteland with smoke and sulfur coming out of the ground. So things that we can very easily relate to, as well as things that are very mind-bending when you think about the physics involved of it. Moving away from the realms themselves and how they operate, I want to talk about the gods. This is really an awesome point that I love the transition from 8th to Age of Sigmar with. You see, in 8th edition, the gods that we knew were much more background material than influences in the world. By this I mean, take the Wood Elves for example. They had a god named Kurnoth. Nothing really mattered about Kurnoth. He wasn't really ever important. There was a character named Orion with a spear of Kurnoth, which apparently he gifted to him. But that's about it. Same thing with Sigmar. There were people who were devoted to him. He had a whole church set up and everything like that. But realistically, he didn't do much in the mortal realms. They were all just reverenced. They were referenced and very held in reverent stature to, but the gods themselves didn't have characters or powers or influences in the old world. Now we move into the Age of Sigmar, and if you can just think for a moment about the Greek pantheon. Okay, and this is what I'm talking about. If you've ever seen the old school 70s Clash of the Titans, or even I guess the update, you'll know what I'm talking about, where there's a bunch of gods standing around, and even though they're just standing around, they're actually at the same time influencing the mortal world that they're looking down upon. So yes, even though Sigmar is creating Stormcast Eternals and shooting lightning at his enemies in the stories, he's also just in Azir interacting with his people, doing the things that he needs to do to keep the realm going. This is a huge departure because it means that each one of these gods of the realm that we know of, so Sigmar, Nagash, Alariel, the four Chaos gods, they each have personality. They are each a person. They have likes and dislikes. They have personality traits, things that rise them to anger, things that calm them down, goals they all have disappointments. They have chosen warriors. They have people that they can infuse their power into. They can give gifts. They can take things away. They can interact with mortals in a much more interesting way. Now, it also seems that each one of these gods have a sort of a race that embodies them. So for Sigmar, for example, he took ordinary men and women from around the realms as they were dying and infused them with his power. So they are not just human anymore. They're demigods. They're just a step below him because they have so much of his power involved in them. Alariel with the Sylvaneth has several different races of the trees, the spirits and things like that are an embodiment of her power, not just another race that she claims. If you've ever seen the Age of Sigmar book, the one that came out with the box set, the full campaign book, not just the novel. That does a great job of introducing throughout the Age of Myth the different ones. There's the Dwarden gods, Grimnir, Gorka Morka and his followers. These are all people that all have their own mythos and stories and goals to go with them, and it makes each god in this pantheon that we know of a really interesting character and his followers very interesting. So now that we have an idea of the setting and sort of the major players, the gods themselves, in the Age of Sigmar, what I lastly want to talk about is kind of the state of where the realm is at. We're going to do a brief history real quick and kind of catch you up to speed. So for those of you who don't know or are just coming into the game and trying to get an idea what's going on, Warhammer 8th edition took place on what is now known as the Old World. This was essentially one world where all 8 winds of magic were channeled into, and chaos caught his eye. And so all 4 chaos gods were just adamant about conquering this world. Well, in the end, Archaon, who wishes to ascend to godhood, denied them their victory and took basically the world into his own hands and obliterated it. Now, that's the last that we knew for quite some time. Well, what happened was some of the forces there were destroyed, absolutely, utterly and completely, but other ones were not. They were trapped up and swept up in the wind of magic and reborn, as we now know them, in the mortal realms. Sigmar himself was found clung to the burning embers of the planet of the Old World, and he now uses that as his resource for creating his elite soldiers known as the Stormcast Eternals. So Sigmar is found by Dracothian, a large star dragon, one of those god beasts that I was talking about earlier, that just bigger than imagination monsters. And Dracothian shows him around the mortal realms. He gets to view them. He sees that there's populations re-booming, essentially. Life is good, life is peaceful. Now, as these are all going on, all these events are taking place, the gods of chaos, who had kind of turned their eye away to fight amongst themselves once the old world was destroyed, are starting to realize that there's life again and that there's more worlds to conquer. So as Sigmar is investigating these and kind of exploring, he's also drawing the attention of the enemy itself. All of this takes place in what's called the Age of Myth. This is, even though it's talked about like fact, there's a lot of fleshing out that could be done by Black Library if they ever wanted to go back and write books about this time. Shortly after the Age of Myth comes the Age of Chaos. Now, this is when those chaos gods who just got alerted to all this new life and stuff take notice of the realms and then try to invade them. Now, just like in the old world, demons don't exist in reality for very long. They can't poke through permanently, so they kind of just did little small raids here and there. Nurgle has his eyes set on the realm of life. Khorne has his eyes set on the realm of fire, and Tzeentch really wants the realm of metal. And things seem to be going okay, though. Sigmar and the good guys are kind of fighting out these small, desperate attacks, attempts to puncture through. And something happens that is very poorly described, and I think it's on purpose because they want to go back and fill the story in, and I bet you there's a plot twist coming up. But something happens, and the pantheon of gods is kind of shattered. Nagash turns his back on Sigmar and introduces chaos to the mortal realms. He lets him in. So suffice to say, chaos enters, and now we enter what I just called the Age of Chaos. With that foothold in, the demons and chaos gods really just run rampant. And because the pantheon is now shattered, they can't coordinate the way that they were before. The good guys get their teeth kicked in, and one by one the realms begin to be conquered. Now, none of them are fully conquered because they're so massive, but it really, the good guys are reeling essentially, and this, where we find things at the beginning of the Age of Sigmar, as we now know it, just about every good guy force is some kind of refugee. Very few forces exist and have existed untouched. So yeah, we come to the brink at the darkest hour, and right at that moment, Sigmar decides it is time, and so he opens his armies up because, should have mentioned this before, so as the chaos forces are invading all the realms, Sigmar sucks up all his best guys and retreats them back to his realm, Azir, and shuts and locks the door. So all the other realms but his are getting conquered, but While most people will scoff at that and say that he was a coward and ran away and just wanted to protect his own and be selfish, he understood that with the Pantheon shattered, there was simply no way to defend against the massive forces coming at them. So he locked himself away, started work on his Stormcast Eternal army, which he had just come up with, as a way to peel them back. So at that moment, when all hope seems lost, Sigmar opens up his own realm and shoots his Stormcast Eternals to all other 7 realms simultaneously, and the war begins all over again. So this is the game that we know. It's called Age of Sigmar, and it's fighting in that high fantasy universe with a shattered pantheon of gods that Sigmar is trying to reassemble as they push back chaos and put it on the back foot. Now this is really, really interesting, and the reason I went into this whole dialogue about the histories and stuff to bring you up to speed is because this is a unique narrative for Games Workshop. In 40k and in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, all the editions, the good guys were always getting their teeth kicked in. It was always 2 minutes to midnight, and things were never looking very good. Well, with Age of Sigmar, things are still grim, the stakes are still high, but this is good guys on the offensive. No more defensive, retreating maneuvers, always losing ground, always falling back. This is the good guys' last stand, and the Stormcast Eternals represent that last stand. So having the good guys be the invaders is a really unique thing for the company, and it opens up a whole lot of really cool storytelling as they're finding other races and re-encouraging them, and they're collecting the rest of the pantheon that got shattered. They just discovered Alariel, brought her back on board, and now she's gone full bore into war mode, and she's tearing apart chaos, and it's pretty awesome. So with that, we've covered the realms themselves, the pantheon of gods, and the overall tone of Age of Sigmar as far as the good guys being on the offensive rather than getting their teeth kicked in. And I think that does a really good job of introducing you to the feel of the game as far as a narrative perspective or lore perspective goes. So as we go forward in these lore videos, we're going to be filling in these gaps here and trying to get you a better picture of the mortal realms and the war that's going on as it happens. If you have a lore question burning up inside you, go ahead and hit subscribe and leave the question down below, and that'll be our next video. I hope you found this video entertaining. Thank you so much for watching. If you have a lore question burning up inside you, go ahead and hit subscribe and leave the question down below, and that'll be our next video. I hope you found this video entertaining. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.